Welcome to episode number 32 of the Between Two Brands podcast. I'm your host, Bill Petrie, and I want to thank you for joining me today on what I think is going to be a pretty interesting, pretty eye-opening episode. But before we get to that, let's pay a bill or two, as we like to do around here. Hey, in 2025, your clients are looking for more than just a product with their logo on it. They're looking for rock-solid merchandise solutions that are more than just innovative. They're going to be used for months and years to come. So allow me to introduce you, or maybe in some cases, reintroduce you to the good people over at Coaster Stone. Now, they're the original manufacturer of absorbent stone coasters with unmatched durability, quality, and gorgeous edge-to-edge decorating that allow your creative designs to come to life in full, vibrant color detail. Now, since 1983, Coaster Stone has set the standard when it comes to delivering a retail-inspired experience to any client function. Instead of boring and plain packaging, how about packaging options that are fully customizable? Coaster Stone delivers value far beyond the actual product itself. Now, did you also know they manufacture their pin back buttons right here in the USA? Well, they do, and they're the ideal, cost-effective, and fun pieces of branded merchandise around. Now, with that combination of stone-cold quality, striking decoration, cost per impression, and unmatched value, David Glenn and his team are so ready to help you make a rock-solid impression with your clients. Email them at promo@coasterstone.com today, and let's get your next project started. All right, so I said it was going to be an interesting episode, and I believe it's going to be, but I think every episode's interesting, or I wouldn't record them. So today's episode is going to be very heavy on the promotional products industry. Had some news come out recently, and our guest has some ties to PPAI as well. So let's start with what happened last week. Marc Simon from Halo Branded Solutions, long tenured CEO at Halo, it was announced he's retiring at the end of August. When I read the press release, I felt it sounded very abrupt, quite frankly. And for those of you who don't know my history with Halo and Marc, I worked at Halo about 9 months before they filed for bankruptcy is when I started. And when Marc, who became CEO about 2 to 3 months after I started at Halo, when he became the CEO, he quickly identified me as someone who would be retained. And I was always honored by that. I had come from a different industry. I'd come from the computer products and software industry, but I had worked on acquisitions and integrations. And so I became a very valuable tool for Marc in terms of working through the bankruptcy and helping him assess with boots on the ground how things should work. Through the bankruptcy, when I look back on time with Marc, he was, again, people have their own set of ethics and their own sense of fairness. Marc was very fair. I think I've told this story before, but it bears repeating. When you file for bankruptcy, the old company ceases to exist, which means those old invoices that absolutely are owed to people also cease to exist. You cannot pay those invoices, as would violate the court order for the bankruptcy that grants the company to emerge as a new entity, even though it's called the same thing. I remember very distinctly sitting in my office in New York, and we were told as management, if a salesperson needs to do a prepayment, please put it on a credit card. If you don't have a company credit card, I did not at the time. If you don't have a company credit card, put it on your own personal card. You'll be reimbursed in 24 hours. And it just so happened that one of my salespeople needed a prepayment for a supplier that will not be named. And it was about $7,000, which is significant to me now, but it was really significant to me in 2001. I ended up doing that prepayment. Well, that supplier applied that money not to the prepay order, but to an old antecedent invoice, which again, not only is illegal, it's just wrong because that's not how things work. The accounts payable person at the time said that she would not reimburse me because they had applied the money I spent on my credit card to an old debt. Obviously, I was upset. I didn't know what to do. So I called Marc. And Marc was livid, not at me, at the situation. I had a check the next day and that person was asked to pursue career excellence elsewhere immediately. So I always remember that, and I thought that was a very fair and right thing for Mark to do. As after we emerged from bankruptcy, I reported to Mark for 4 years. He was somewhat of a mentor, but he could be very cruel. I'll be very candid. He could be very cruel. Without getting into great detail, he definitely dressed me down publicly a time or two, and that always stuck with me. That was incredibly rude and unfair. And the people who had to witness that still talk about it to this day. And, Mark did come up to me later and said, I was hard on you because I knew you could take it, but I wanted to put the fear of God into everybody else. And that's just not a management style I appreciated. I found him to be aloof at times, as brilliant as he was. He was an attorney, or yeah, I don't mean to speak of him in the past tense. He is an attorney and an accountant in every sense of the words. He understands money, he understands law, and he's very good at those things. But I found him sometimes to really be, not really be into the actual business of promotional products. Now, what he was into, which I will always give him credit for, he made sure that the salespeople were thought of first. So when the bankruptcy happened, everybody, all the suppliers had many debts that they wanted repaid. And Mark petitioned the bankruptcy court, and they agreed that the first people that would be paid were the salespeople. Because without the salespeople, Halo really didn't exist. And I always thought that was a really great thing he did on behalf of the salespeople. Just like all of us, I found Mark to be a very complex person. Um, Not the most jovial person I've ever met, but man, passionate about his family, passionate about the Cubs. He loves the Chicago Cubs. When he made hard decisions, it really impacted him. When he made the decision to transition Halo from an office-based model to what at the time the company, a sister company of Halo, was called Lee Wayne, which was home-based salespeople. And when he decided that to save the company, we have to close all, I think it was 35 offices at the time, close all the offices. And he knew that about, I think, 30 or $40 million in terms of sales that salespeople had would walk out the door because those salespeople were used to offices and they went to other companies. But it saved about 55 or $60 million in annual spend. So just closing those offices, getting rid of those leases, that alone, and Mark would say this often, that saved the company. And I always thought that was a very difficult decision. He handled it with such grace and such dignity. It was something I really always admired. While maybe he and I never meshed personally, I always respected him professionally, and think when I think of Halo, I don't think of Lou Weisbach, which a lot of people used to think of. I think of Marc Simon. So he's leaving Halo at the end of the month. I thought he was going to leave after we emerged. When I say we, I'm not there anymore, but when Halo emerged from the bankruptcy, he really was very good at turning around companies. But I think over time, he really grew to enjoy this industry. His legacy, he served on the board, PPAI twice. He was Counselor Person of the Year, I believe, twice. He is someone who I think has a very positive legacy in this industry from an afar perspective. And I'll say this, the fact that he's not in the PPAI Hall of Fame, and it shocks me. And if he's not in the Hall of Fame come January, I'll be stunned. You know, Anybody who's heard me talk about any Hall of Fame, I have one requirement. It is, can you tell the story of X without that person? If you cannot tell the story of whatever you're talking about without that human being, then that person needs to be in the Hall of Fame. And I don't think you can tell the story of promotional products without Marc Simon. Marc Simon turned around and saved what is now, I think, the third largest distributorship in the country, in the nation, almost $1 billion, when there was times when it was pushing $130 million. And that was down from $500 million. I mean, he really turned around that company. You cannot tell the story of the promotional products industry without Marc Simon. So Mark is leaving the promotional products industry at the end of the month. I wish him nothing but happiness in retirement. I know, he and his wife Marcy will probably spend a lot of time at Cubs games. Certainly spend a lot of time with their kids and grandkids, and I will always be. Uh, think of my time with Mark as one where I learned more than I ever thought I would. Not only about bankruptcy for sure, but also business and how to lead an organization, both positively and things I didn't want to do. So kudos to Mark. Wish him nothing but the best in retirement. All right, before we get to our next guest, our only guest. Let's pay a bill, shall we? Hey, many people know how to build a business, but few understand not only when to sell your business, but the process involved to ensure that you find the right partner and you maximize the return on your investment. Honestly, you need an expert, especially one in the promotional products industry, to help you, which is where our friends over at Certified Marketing Consultants come in. Jamie Watson and her team have decades of experience facilitating private company sales in the branded merchandise space. Now, to help you evaluate if it's time to sell your business, reach out to Jamie and Certified Marketing Consultants at info@certifiedmarketing.com for a confidential discussion today. All right, that's enough of my yakking. Let's go ahead and bring on our guest. All right, my guest today truly doesn't need an introduction, but I like wasting people's time, so I'm going to introduce him anyway. He is the former CEO of PPAI, Senior Vice President of Geiger, Senior Vice President of ASI, and now leads industry service provider eXtendTech. He thrives at the intersection of strategy, people, and technology, leading organizations through transformation. 20 plus years of driving the digital transformation in B2B, blending promo industry insight, strategy, and technology. Please welcome my friend, the one and only Dale Denham. Dale, thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast. I'm sure all three listeners are excited to hear what you have to say today.
It's nice to be on for all three listeners. I hope when you do that introduction, you had some sound effects like a bunch of cheering people or maybe some golf claps.
Always. Well, there's always a crowd. Usually I record in front of a stadium is probably a bit much, but pretty close to it. Maybe an arena. An arena.
Mhm.
All right. Before we get into my five very easy questions for you, is there anything you wanted to talk about today?
Well, is this where I get to ask you a question about
It
you?
is. It sure is. Or
Okay.
you can ask about me. We can talk about whatever you'd like.
Well, I would love to talk about the Buccaneers, but nobody else really loves to talk about the Buccaneers. But I'm not going to predict anything, but they are my team and they are looking good. Seeing the Baker Mayfield story is quite cool. And I wasn't a
Absolutely.
fan of his until he started. Look, I said I wasn't going to talk about him, but here I go. When he started with the Bucks, I wasn't really sure, but man, the leadership that he brings and the energy that he brings. And he seems to be a legitimately good human. And I love those kind of leaders where, he's taking hits and he's standing up to people with his team. And I love Tom Brady too, but a totally different kind of leader. And they
100%.
both got things done. But I'm
Yeah.
really enjoying Baker Mayfield's style.
Yeah, he's fun to watch. He's a guy who's been kind of doubted his entire career, even going back to college. I mean, when he followed Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, and then he went to Oklahoma, won the Heisman when no one thought he'd win the Heisman. And then we know what happened in Cleveland. He had a pit stop in Carolina, I believe. And you're right, totally different leadership style than Brady, but there's something that I think does bind them, and that's that inner fire. Brady certainly very polished, and he comes across that way, especially later in his career. But I don't think that fire ever left him. And I see the same thing in Mayfield. And Mayfield always reminds me of what Johnny Manziel might have been had he put in the work. I don't think my Manziel had the talent that Mayfield does, but he had that certain something that elevated a team. He made a team better when he was into it. Again, I'm not saying Johnny Football would have made a great pro quarterback, but he didn't put in the work, so we'll never know. Mayfield, I think, is a very hard worker, and he's so easy to root for. Plus, you have former Texas Aggie great Mike Evans on your team, so
Well, listen, I love Mike Evans too, but that's enough about the Bucks. Let's talk about you.
oh,
So,
let's
how
do
long
that.
have you been in business for yourself as Brand of Eight? Um, I think some of your listeners actually don't really know what you do. And then,
Yeah.
where's it going? Are you going to build this into a bigger business?
Good question. Very self-serving, so I really like it. So I've been doing this just over 5 years. From just the 30-second background, I was president of Promo Corner when the pandemic hit. Um, the ownership, who I still am very close to and very good friends with, wanted to make some changes that, frankly, I didn't agree with. And I remember the conversation was, you deserve someone as president of your organization that supports your vision. And I'm sorry, but I don't. It doesn't matter who was proven right or wrong. It was just time to go. So we shook hands. And so in July of 2020, really smart timing on my part, decided to start Brandivate. And what we do is we're a full service outsourced marketing branding company that serves promotional product suppliers and distributors to help them tell their stories. And just like any startup, especially in a pandemic when revenue was down, profits were down, and I'm sitting over here, but your marketing needs help. It was slow going, but after 5 years, I think we're doing well. I've started to look at, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to scale it? How do I scale it? The challenge I have, and this is not an egotistical comment, it's just a fact. Brandivate is me. It's my brain. I do much of the work. Now I do have some people who do some support work, things I don't want to do, the billing, the invoicing, the operational stuff. I just don't have much interest in. But in terms of the creativity and the strategy and the rebranding and all that, that stuff I do. And so I took a hard look at it for the past 6 months, and I made a three bucket list: things that I want to do in my business that I do not want to give up. The second bucket was things I want to do in my business, but I probably should give up. And then the third bucket is things I absolutely hate doing and I never want to do. And so I figured if I take 6 months and just list every activity in one of those three slots, I might be able to build a job description that where I could get some help and free time. And I did. And then I started thinking, okay, so I hire someone on at, I don't know, a fair wage plus, whatever else goes along with that. I maybe double revenues. I'm not making any more money. And now I've got someone who's reporting to me. And now I've got someone who needs management. And so I thought, I'm thinking my actual work time increases, my income stays the same, maybe decreases, at least initially. And I don't think I want that. And so I've kind of made the decision, at least as of right now, my ego does not need to grow Brandivate into something that is this conglomerate. It is a real thriving business, something I'm very proud of. One of the things when I look back on my history, I love building something from nothing. I do. That's what that's what Brandivate is. That's what Promocations is. What I do with Josh Robbins. I like building something from nothing. That is an incredible high for me. But right now, I think I'm just going to continue the quasi solopreneur route and have my support staff that allows me to live the life I want to live, serve the clients the way I want to service them. I don't have to worry about, is this person I hire going to do it the way I would do it? Is it going to measure up to what I want? Because I am smart enough to know that if I do hire someone, I should not expect them to care and bleed as much as I would for this organization. They would be an employee. They're not going to be an owner. And
Yeah.
so that's where I've arrived right now.
All right. Well, good for you. I think it's what a lot of distributors tend to go through, right? Do I want to be a small organization or do I want to grow? And sometimes they make that decision that you were thinking about making and really regret it because they work harder and they make less money.
Yeah, and again, I like, there are things that are challenging and I'd love the help. But it is what it is. I'm
All right.
happy with that.
Well,
All right, is that it?
congratulations.
Are you,
5 years, 5 years
thank you.
is a great, great run. And usually that's when things start to go really well for people. So, and you've got a great brand that I think a lot of people know about. Although I still think a lot of people don't really know all that you do, other
Probably
than
not,
podcast.
other than podcasts. Yeah, but all right. Well,
And
hey,
and I,
thank you
I
for the
guess I do have
question.
one other question for you.
Yeah, follow up.
Did you name this between two brands because you look so much like Zach Galifianakis?
I know, and I don't believe I look like Zach Galifianakis, sir.
Oh, sorry,
Uh,
sorry.
no,
Look,
I'm
I was
just
trying
kidding.
to
No,
channel my inner Zach there, you know.
I appreciate that. No, I like the idea. I loved Between Two Ferns. I thought it was genius. And so I started off asking really intentionally awkward questions to people. kind of shifted that. I didn't talk about shifting it, but I'm like, this is getting to be kind of shticky for me.
Yeah,
And now I'm like, I'm turning into kind of a character, and I think where I do best is just being me. I've said it before, I'm the same guy on the podcast as I am at the corner bar, as I am at a football game. I'm just me, and that's where I'm comfortable at. So I do interject my own comedy and my own humor into the questions, but I don't make it intentionally awkward anymore. I didn't feel like it was working overall. For some
I think
guests, it
that's a
worked
good
great.
choice.
Yeah, for some guests, it worked great, but for some people, I felt like I always had to explain and all that. So it's just time to move on. We grow. We grow. All right. I've got some very easy questions for you, Dale Denham.
All
Uh,
right.
let's start with digging in a bit of your past. We would be irresponsible if we didn't touch on this. So it's been over a year since you left PPAI as CEO, and you led the organization through some extremely challenging times uh, during and emerging from the pandemic. So I really have two questions here. What accomplishments are you most proud of? And then what is your biggest regret or regrets now that you've had a year to reflect on your time there?
Hmm. There is so much we did. Um, I guess one of the things that I'm most proud of is the PPAI 100. And I'm largely proud of that because the way it came out wasn't my idea. There's so many things that everybody else had ideas, but the one that I think had the biggest impact was the PPAI 100. And the seed of that was my idea. And I was talking to Josh after he was hired, and I said, I am tired of referring to our top companies as a number on a list of somebody else. We are the voice of the industry. That was part of our mission. So we need to, he said, and rightfully, and I love Josh. He was right. He said, there's already a list like that. We don't need to do another list. I said, I want a list like that. So figure it out. And I pushed. And this is one of the things about me. I will push, but I will listen. And Josh, we talked about it, and then he started going behind my back, not really, but he started putting together meetings with people and saying, how can we do this? And my fingerprints are on it. All sorts of other people's fingerprints are on it, but Josh was the one who made it the combination of, hey, if we're going to do this, this is the approach we're going to take. And I really like that. And why it's one of the things I'm most proud of is because A, there was a lot of different people involved, including Josh taking a major stand against, no, we're not doing it this way. We've got to
Yeah.
do it a better way.
Mm.
But then also, it really elevated the industry. People started going, wait a minute, I want to lead in digital transformation, or I'm already
Mhm.
leaning to sustainability. How do I do more? Or I can
Yeah.
follow those people. So it set us up and set the industry up in a way that I think is going to continue to bring value to the industry. I have more, but I'll stop there for a minute.
Yeah. Let me interject. I think the PPI 100 has evolved into something that people really respect. So that's a great accomplishment. Continue.
So another one is the association. Paul Bellantone was the best ambassador we've ever had, a great CEO, great leader, and I wish that I could have had the same connections that he managed to build right away. And he was really good at that. And Bob did a great job with the finances and such. But the organization at its core was not changing. It was just doing what it had been doing and doing it well,
Mhm.
really well. And ultimately, one of the things I'm also really proud of is we changed a lot internally in processes and systems, our order processing system, our ERP, our CRM, those kind of things. Those are all boring things, but they're essential to the future. And so I'm proud of that. But probably the other thing that I would mention, well, two other things. One, we left it in the best financial situation it's ever been in. They have more reserves than ever, and you want your nonprofit to have reserves because when they need to
Absolutely.
invest in the industry or when something bad happens, you don't want them going out of business. And the
Right.
last thing is the membership remodel, the overhaul.
Hmm.
That membership structure was decades old.
Yep.
We turned 16 levels into 5 levels and made it all understandable, and it's a lot better off. And that had been tried 3 times before, and between the board and our staff, we pulled it off.
So those are some great accomplishments. And like I said, it was during a very difficult time. Any regrets? Anything that if you could go back in time, you would maybe change or shift how you did some things?
So I think the thing that I would do differently is with the amount of change we had, and I embraced it fully, and the board did as well. I would have, and I have a bias for action. I want to move. I want to get things done, and I'm
This I
really
know.
excited when I
This
can
I
get
know.
things done.
Dale and I have worked
But
on several boards together. This is a very accurate statement.
But the amount of change and the pace of the change works in an organization that has 60 people. Where it struggles is in a federated organization where the regional associations, even if it doesn't truly affect them, they want to know, they want to be a part of that. And the members, especially the ones who have given in board membership,
Yeah.
it's really hard to keep them in the loop on every change, even if you're bringing them along and you're communicating with them. They aren't doing this every day. And so I would have adjusted the pace of change or the amount of change to balance those things out. We went a little too heavy on the amount of change in and the pace of change, and one of those should have shifted.
Yeah. I think that's a great answer, and it's a fair one. Like I said, you came to PPAI at a very challenging time, post Paul Bellantone, who was a very different style of leader than you are, and you were given kind of a mandate. We've got to change things around here. Not an easy position to be in. So I just wanted to address that. All right, let's move
Thank
on.
you.
Can we just,
Yeah.
yes, no, thank you. One thing you've been really vocal about, especially the past few years, is the need for data privacy, especially when it seems there's a data breach every hour on the hour. What would you suggest people immediately do to protect their data from an organizational perspective?
Such a boring topic. People really they don't want to think about it, but it really
They should be
it
thinking
boils
about it.
it boils down to A, for the average person listening to your podcast, it's simply just have everything secured behind two-factor.
Mhm.
Put everything in trusted tools. So a lot of people will go out and they'll start up an Airtable database and they'll do all these different things. Well, now you've got data everywhere, and
Yeah.
sooner or later you're going to leave something open. So put it into fewer things and focus on those fewer things. Um, it's a lot of technical things that I could get into that, again, people won't care about, but two-factor authentication on everything for sure. And be really vigilant about not clicking on links and those kind of things. But I will tell you, there are firms in this industry who still have information out, and they're not small firms usually, they're big. They still have
No.
information out there unprotected that I can find in a standard Google search that maybe isn't GDPR kind of data or anything like that, but it still shows a lapse in how they're processing their data. And then I do think people should be aware of the CCA and the GDPR just in general, because when you're giving data back and forth, you may be violating some of those rules in the future.
Yeah, yeah, let me ask you this about passwords. Should people be changing their passwords every year, every 6 months? And
No.
should you, no?
No, that's old. I change my bank account and my email account every couple of years, but two-factor authentication is the key now. It used to be you were supposed to change your password every 90 days. That was actually required by
Right.
security compliance rules. Now they've done away with that because it actually caused more problems. People were saving their passwords insecurely. So 1 year, yeah, that's not a bad model. But frankly, if I had to give people advice, I would say as long as you have two-factor authentication and you're protecting that right, you don't need to. The biggest thing is a lot of people lose their phone where their two-factor authentication is or get a new one and don't restore it before they do that. That causes real problems.
I've had my Twitter. I used to have BillPetrie.com on Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now. And it got hacked. And it was an act of Congress trying to get it back. I didn't have two-factor authentication on it. So
And that can
I
still be
learned my
hacked
lesson
too,
that
but
way.
it's you
Yeah.
if you're going to get two-factor authentication hacked, you're either messing up something or you're a target that nobody in our industry would be. I mean, it's
No,
hard to
no,
hack it, but people can.
no, nobody's targeting me. You also are very focused on digital transformation, and that's one topic on everybody's mind is obviously AI. From your perspective, what excites you about the use of AI in the promotional product space, and what scares you to death about the use of AI in our industry?
So I'll start with the what scares me, and I don't think anything really scares me to death. But what scares me is the fact really that there's just so much hype that people are rushing into things that they shouldn't. the
Yeah.
amount of hallucinating that I experience, I'm interacting with AI 50 times a day or more on the average day. Um, it's incredibly hard to get it to not hallucinate or frankly to listen to instructions and stick to it. Sometimes I'm like, what? This is the best employee, never complains, does exactly what I ask. It's
Right.
awesome. And then there's something, if you use ChatGPT, I've told it at least a dozen times, if not 50 times, never use an M dash because I don't use M dashes. Then, I'm rewriting things anyhow, but I don't want to see it when I'm looking at when it's helping me write. And no matter how
You
many times,
can't
I'll
stop.
literally say it, and the next time it'll do it again. And so if it can't follow that simple instruction, that is a core instruction as well as in that, it's amazing. And I've used it, when I say I've used it 50 times, a lot of times it's like my AC is not running right or this. It
Right.
gives what really seems like good information. But if you talk to an expert, all of a sudden you're like, wait, but that's not quite right. And it misleads
Right.
you. And then it's this whole of it tells you what you want to hear. It is literally programmed to tell you what you want to hear.
Because it's your best hype man. I mean, I use ChatGPT every day, and for every client I've trained a GPT for that client, their
Smart.
voice and all that. Now, I've always written with M dashes. And so now when I see them write with M dashes, now I write with M dashes, I'm getting rid of them because I everybody thinks it's
You don't
AI.
want to, right, right.
Yeah, so it cuts both ways. All right, so what excites you about AI and
Well, first, I
programming?
want to compliment you. I think you
Yeah,
should write a story about creating voices. We've done that for eXtendTech. It's
it
really
works.
wise. It helps you just push everything through and say, is this in that voice? And even if you just validate it rather than have it write it.
It's my best collaborator for sure. I've also trained each one to be critical. Are they as critical as I want? No, but if it's not, I say I need you to look through this again and be critical and find the flaws, and it generally does. But again, it will never stop. So it'll find a flaw in everything. Even at some point, it's got to say, "Okay, enough. It's fine. It's fine."
So there's a lot of things I'm excited about with AI.
Yeah,
I see it so much more than the chatbot that it is. Most of
yeah.
us are using it as a chatbot. I've actually, for fun, written programs with it that are fully functional. Now, I have a coding background. I haven't written code in years. I understand data extremely well, so I can do those things. But we have our developers using it and it's enhancing development time. I don't buy these statistics because we actually got a 50% jump in productivity, but over time that goes away because of all sorts of different reasons. So that really excites me, scares me a little too for my son who's in computer science in
Hmm.
university. However, when I think about the future potential, I am more excited for this industry specifically because I believe someday you will be able to just write an email order and AI will be able to translate that really well into a supplier. This is also scary. So you create a nice purchase order today as a distributor, you send it to a supplier, they're still having to rekey it, even if you're sending it electronically in 90% of the cases, maybe more. Eventually, AI, and it's there already to some extent, but it's just not perfect, is going to say, yeah, this is what they meant. Here was their intent, map it directly to it, and solve a lot of the complexity that we spend a lot of time just translating information. So I think that's going to be very large for our industry, among other things.
Love it. That's a great, great answer. Thank you. All right, let's move on. One of the things that we have in common is that we both have twins. Now, I have one that's just begun his career in sports marketing and broadcasting in Montgomery, Alabama, and one who will be working as an engineer in Dallas when he graduates from Mississippi State this December. Whereas your girls are 16 and are juniors in high school and are now driving themselves to said high school. Now, what have you learned from having multiples that you carry with you in your professional career? Because you have a single, but you also have twins. I only have the twins. I want to know from your perspective, what has having twins taught you?
It's all hard for me to separate that a little bit just from parenting in general.
Fair
But
enough.
the interesting thing that is true of all of them is they are all parented essentially the same way, but these two at the exact same time, essentially the same way, and they will be so different. And I know you can relate to this, and every parent of any children can, but it's for you and me, it's wild because literally the same time, everything, there's no, I learned something when I was parenting,
Yeah.
and they are so different. Um, and you do have to parent them just slightly different but you parent them the same. But if this one's interested in something, and this one's not, you really have to say, wait a minute, I can't overly praise this one because then this person will feel guilty and vice versa. And so it's really about balancing that. And I would say becoming a parent 22 years ago now was the best thing to happen to me as a leader because that was when I learned, and I sort of hate to admit this, but I led through authority in my early career, not intentionally. And I
Right.
wasn't like, I'm the boss, you do this.
Right.
And I realized that motivating people, and I did try to motivate people and it was natural, but it was a
Hmm.
whole different level once I had children. And that's true with the twins as well.
Yeah.
That if you set them up for success and help motivate, but I also have a child that didn't accept that, not my twins, but just didn't work with that.
Yeah.
So again, you can do everything the same and do it perfect. None of us are perfect, but in theory, according to the books, you could, and they will behave differently. And I recognize that in leadership too. People are different. And so
Hmm.
when you go into the office, you can have two people that look the same or have so much the same background. They are different, and you have to work with them each as an individual.
Yeah, I would echo that. Are yours fraternal? I don't remember. Are they fraternal or
They're
identical?
fraternal. They're not
Okay,
identical.
so mine are fraternal as well. So what I explain to people is, gosh, they're so different. And what I say is what they are brothers that were just born at the same time. Or in your case, they're sisters born at the same time. So they share the same DNA from me and my wife and from you and your wife, but they're different people. Just like I have an older brother who's 4 years older than me. We share the DNA, but we're radically different people. And I think that's hard for people to wrap their heads around. And I always we started the same way as we got to parent the same way. We have to be consistent and da 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 da. And I don't know when we realized or flipped the script. It's like at some point you have to parent them differently. And I read somewhere in a parenting book, and I think it was one of those books of your kids are going to college and how to let go and all that. So we got one of those books, and it said something that really stuck out with me, and it really struck me that kids never have the same parents. So I have Mitch and Drew. Drew, in his mind, has very different parents than Mitch has parents because Mitch's parenting needs were different and Drew's were different. I thought I've never looked at it that way. I've always looked at it,
Mm.
well, let's be consistent with the kids, and then at some point the needs are different, and it really helped us shift that parenting, and it helped me very similar to you working with other people, realizing that, man, you have to be somewhat of a chameleon in a leadership role, or you are doomed. It just can't be an autocratic authoritarian way. So I loved your answer.
Well,
All right.
I'll just add to that,
Yeah.
and I think this is really important about parenting and about business. And this is different in yours because you're a solopreneur,
Yeah.
but in PPAI, I need people around me that are going to complement me. I don't need
Hmm.
another Dale. Or if I have another Dale, I need other people to complement that other Dale. And my wife and I, and probably your wife and you, complement each other. And,
So,
sometimes I'm the disciplinarian and, more strict, and sometimes that's her. Typically it's me because she's just a happy person that doesn't want to fit in, but she knows there's a line.
yeah.
The one thing we both do, and this is, I think, important in leadership as well, we always have each other's back. If an employee and you're working together, you have to have each other's back, even if you don't agree. If in PPAI, if the board members would have some disagreement, they'd walk out and we'd all have the same outcome, even if
Absolutely.
one of us had a different opinion. And I just think parenting is so much like that leadership that you're lucky to have a complement if you do, but if you're both the same, it's a
Yeah.
little harder, I think, to do it well.
Oh, I totally agree. I love that. All right. Last question. You live in Tampa. And you have to keep one eye on the weather at all times. And we're heading into hurricane season. I want to ask you, is prepping for big storms something that's met with a well-planned tactical approach or more of like, whatever, we'll get to it if there's ever a storm? I mean, how do you react to that?
Oh, it's much more the latter because there's so
Okay.
many false alarms. It's just,
Yeah.
but the interesting thing is the first hurricane that hit since I moved to Florida 6 or 7 years ago, we all had to put up shutters in our neighborhood. All our houses were built around the same time and they all had shutters. And it brought us all together as a community. So that turned out really well. And then a couple years ago, we had another one. And then all of a sudden, most people have replaced their windows with hurricane-proof windows. It's a little steep of an investment, so I haven't done that. But that's really the only prep that most of us will do is prepping our windows, making sure we have gas for the generators. If you live on the beach, it is a different story. I don't live
Sure.
near the water. I'm not in a flood zone. I mean, everything in Florida is a flood zone, but I'm not in one that's likely to flood. So when you're this far away from risk, you much more lackadaisical. I know a lot of people who just don't do anything and they're fine. And I'm not one of those people because I'm like the one time I don't is the one time that there's going to be a tree branch fly through my window.
Totally get it. What? Sorry. Oh, I just got handed a rapid fire before we wrap this up, and thankfully, it's a Tampa Bay Buccaneers edition. So
Oh,
I
nice.
anticipated your desires here. So you know the rules. You've heard what I used to do with Kirby. There are no wrong answers. I'm just going to give you an either or. You just give me your gut reaction. Are you ready to play rapid
Let's
fire?
do it.
All right. Captain Fear or Buccaneer Bruce?
Captain Fear. No
Wrong.
doubt.
Buccaneer Bruce always wins. Mike Evans or Mike Allstott?
Oh, see, that's a hard one.
I
I'm
know.
gonna.
I did my homework.
I love them both so much, but I'll give it to Allstott just because I
Okay.
need to do a little throwback. I have his jerseys. I got to meet him. Love the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked. Okay. Derek Brooks or Warren Sapp?
Oh, definitely Derek Brooks. No question.
Okay. Greg Schiano or John McKay?
John McKay. That's a tough
Yeah.
one, but yeah, you give
My,
the
my,
two roughest coaches. But the best John McKay line is, "How did you feel about your team's execution?" I think it's a
I'm
great
in
idea.
favor.
So I got to
Yeah,
give
I'm
it
in
to
favor.
McKay for that.
Yeah. Love that. Brad Johnson or Vinny Testaverde?
Well, Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl, so you got to go with Brad.
That's fair. Martin Gramatica or Connor Barth?
Oh, Martine. What was? There's no question. Actually, one of
Okay.
my neighbors in the neighborhood is his brother.
Oh, okay.
So in case
Well,
he watches this, I had to say that.
I love it. Okay. Last one. Tampa Stadium, affectionately known as the Big Sombrero, or Raymond James Stadium, which
Oh,
sadly
definitely
doesn't have a
Raymond
cool
James.
nickname.
Those seats in the big sombrero were horrible.
I'm going to say wrong. I saw a game. I saw what was the old MLS team in the late 70s in the Big Sombrero, the Tampa Bay Sidekicks. Was that Tampa, Tampa Bay something?
Oh, the Rowdies?
Yes, the Rowdies. That was it. Way back when. I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Sun City, close to Tampa. So, okay, before we say goodbye to our friend Dale, let's go ahead and thank our sponsor. This episode of Between Two Brands has been brought to you by the good folks over at Coaster Stone, home of the original absorbent stone coaster. With that combination of stone cold quality, striking decoration, low cost per impression, retail packaging, and unmatched value, David Glenn and his team at Coaster Stone are ready to help you make a rock solid impression with your clients. Give them an email today at promo@coasterstone.com. Dale Denham, thank you for taking the time. It's always good to see you. And
Great to see you.
we'll have to do this again sometime.
Sounds good. Cheers.